I got to say, I love these interviews that we have, and the regularity that I have a chance to speak with many of the elected officials on the South Shore. And joining me is a gentleman who I speak to on a regular basis. His name is State Representative Josh Cutler, representing the 6th Plymouth District. Representative, how are you?
Hey, Kevin, I'm doing great. Good to see you again.
Yeah,
Virtually.
Virtually. It's good to see you and hear you virtually. Since the last time we talked, it seems as though things are looking up to a degree for the Commonwealth, except for the fact that murder hornets have entered the United States, and we have to worry about the bee population. Things seem to be looking up here in the Commonwealth, so much so that the governor is allowing folks, according to stipulations, to go out and golf as long as you're wearing a mask.
Yeah, I wish I golfed. I guess I'll have to take it up. But yeah, it seems like, they threw the plague, now pestilence. I mean, what's next? I think I saw in the news that we may have a snowstorm next week or coming up in a few days. So we're ready for anything. But yeah, no, in all seriousness, Kevin, the data, by all reports are trending in the right direction. Obviously on a day-to-day basis, you see blips up and down, and it's important, I think, not to get too caught up in the day-to-day data, but to look at it, to step back and look at it, the trends. And, we see that the trends in terms of, the key metrics, the ratio of positive tests, the number of hospitalizations, the number of ICU hospitalizations, and of course, the number of deaths are all generally trending in the right direction. Certainly the hospitalization data is, and the positive test data. So that's good news. Obviously, we're not out of the woods yet, but I think it's clear that we've passed the initial, quote unquote surge. Hopefully we're on the back end of that. And so we're starting to see some movement towards, reopening businesses. We saw recently the governor decided to reopen golf courses, which I know is a very popular move. I've heard from a lot of folks in my district who were concerned about that. And, I think it makes sense. It's one activity that for the most part you can do while still maintaining social distancing and facial coverings and being safe. So I'm sure there'll be some other steps in the near future. And that was a positive one today.
How has it been to get acclimated to virtual settings, to do things remotely? I know that you have been somebody who on a regular basis have been finding ways to connect with your constituents. How has it been to get acclimated? Not being in person with someone, but do it, like we're doing it.
Yeah. I mean, it's okay. I think it's actually, obviously we didn't choose this scenario, but it's working out pretty well. I think from that point of view, we've opened up, new ways of, communicating. We've had, virtual formal sessions. We've had virtual committee hearings, and those are things that bring more people into the fold that maybe wouldn't have been able to participate. So, that's a positive thing. We've done, I've done live shows on Facebook and on local community access. I mean, I think one thing this is shown, I'll say, is the importance of community access television, because, in many cases we wouldn't have these forums to be able to reach out to folks, and also, local radio as well. So, I'm enjoying it. We're sort of learning as we go. I'm learning more about it. I just learned this week how to do Facebook Live videos on Zoom. So, learning the good stuff. But I think it's hopefully these tools and these things that we've learned will continue on after we're past the sort of the crisis and back to to regular, or as close as it can be to regular life. But we'll still use these tools to our benefit. And we certainly I've learned a lot of things. I'm sure other folks have too.
You actually mentioned in regards to having the first virtual formal session. What was it like to be a part of history in the House?
Yeah, so the Massachusetts legislature just recently, this past Wednesday, it's almost 400 years old. We actually predate the U.S. U.S. Congress. The Massachusetts legislature does, and we had our first virtual formal session. So I don't want to mislead anyone. I'm actually not here in the House chamber right now. This is a photograph, but we had our first virtual formal session, and it worked out pretty well. We had a system that was worked out. There were a few members in the chamber, the speaker and a minority leader and a few other members. And the rest of us were all joining remotely, most via phone call. And then we had a streaming online that we could, view what was happening. And so when it was time to vote, and we did have a couple of votes, we had to do a bill actually an important bill to folks may recall. We earlier during the crisis, we extended the tax filing deadline until July 15th. The federal government took that action as well. They extended the tax filing deadline to July 15th, and obviously the state, we mirrored what the federal government had done. It's a little more complicated for us though, Kevin, because we are as a Commonwealth, as a state, we do have to have a balanced budget. And unlike the federal government, we can't just spend whatever we want to spend. We have to have a balanced budget. So in order to accommodate that delay in the tax filing deadline, by pushing it from April to July, we had to find a way to make up for that revenue shortfall for that brief period of time. And so we had to authorize short-term bonding in order to do that. And that's what we did on Wednesday. And per our Constitution, it does require a formal vote of the legislature. So it wasn't something the governor could do unilaterally. So that was the purpose of our formal session, and that was accomplished, passed unanimously. And we had a couple, speeches that were given, one of which was done from the chamber. The other one was someone actually, did it remotely. And so that was the first as well. So, I'm sure there's a few kinks we'll work out, but it worked pretty well. And, that's probably the model we'll be using going forward, for a short time at least, to do, continue the work of the legislature, because there are things, the governor's done a lot of great work, but he can't do everything by executive order. There's some things that do require the legislature to act. We have acted already in a number of ways. For instance, the recent foreclosure prevention legislation folks may have read about, or remote notarization, giving town election flexibility to cities and towns, a lot of things that we have done and been able to do through the legislative process. And now that we have this sort of process for virtual formal sessions, I think we'll be able to do even more. So, certainly we're still learning as we go, but yeah, so it was kind of cool to have the first ever virtual formal session in history. And when you think about the men and women who've come before us throughout, the almost 400 years of the legislature, that's kind of cool. We've had 3 different presidents that went through the Massachusetts state legislature at one point or the other. And so, just to think that this is the first time that's happened in history is kind of neat. Me personally, I was just in my office, down here in the South Shore. I didn't go into Boston, and at my desk, and I had a cup of coffee and my laptop, and that worked out pretty well.
I would ask you, what happens in regards to the finances of the Commonwealth, of the state? When do we get past the COVID-19 legislation, and when do things return to a sub-normal? And I know it could be a while, but if the House is meeting virtually, what does it say that the Senate can, and then once it's done, the governor signs a new budget?
Yeah, so that is the next big step that we're going to take, Kevin, is to tackle the state budget, which is obviously the most important thing we do as a legislature. Our normal budget process would have we would have been already finished with the House budget by now in a normal year. Obviously, that's not the case. Partially for process reasons, meaning we're not actually able to meet, but frankly, more importantly, because of the substantive reasons that we simply don't know what the numbers will be right now, and to craft a budget based on half numbers is not really a prudent thing to do. Normally we have revenue hearings in the late fall, early winter. In January, we have a consensus revenue hearing where we hear from the top economists about what the revenue picture looks like for the next fiscal year, so we can build our budget around that. And obviously, the numbers that we were given and talked about in January are no longer relevant. They're grossly overestimating, I'm sure, the revenues. And so we have to kind of start from scratch to some extent about what our revenue picture looks like for next fiscal year. We have taken steps toward that. We did have an updated consensus revenue hearing. I want to say it was now 2 weeks ago. The days tend to blend together these days, but we heard some fairly dire predictions about the loss of revenue because so many businesses are struggling and folks are out of work, and obviously that impacts the revenue that comes into the Commonwealth. And we're still, learning what those numbers will be, but we heard ranges, expectations between $2 to $3 billion up to as high as $6 or $7 billion hole. So that's a significant amount. It's not going to be an easy budget year. We do expect that the federal government will provide some additional assistance, so that's important. And we also, as a Commonwealth, we do have a rainy day fund, a stabilization fund that we've built up over the years. It's over $3 billion now. So obviously, that's something we can look towards as well. Obviously, it's raining, I think it's fair to say. And if there was ever a time where we were to tap into that, it would be now. We still have to be responsible in terms of how we do that. But it's going to be a challenging year. But I think, we're sort of in a little bit of a wait and see mode to kind of see, have we reached the bottom and are we starting to climb back up or not? And then once we know that, we'll be able to move forward. So I think, Kevin, what you're going to see, I expect, is some short-term budgeting for the first few months of the fiscal year, so we don't lock ourselves into a number that may be not sustainable. And then, what we call 1/12 budgeting for folks who are familiar. And then I think, as we move more towards later in the fall, I would expect that we'll have probably do a budget for the rest of the fiscal year. That would just be my guess, but it's definitely going to be a challenging. It's always a challenging year trying to juggle all the needs and wants, and keep to a conservative, a fiscally responsible budget. Excuse me, but this year is going to be especially challenging, no doubt.
Are you hearing from the three communities that you represent in looking for regular updates and answers? Because they too, this is the time of year that they would be holding town meeting, or with some communities, it might be 2 or 3 weeks past since they held their town meeting, if not longer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of my towns I represent, Duxbury, normally houses its town meeting in early March. In fact, they were one of the first in the state, and they did not have that town meeting. It was obviously postponed. And we've given flexibility to cities and towns, by the way, to do that. We passed legislation that I actually worked on to allow cities and towns to postpone their town meeting 30 days at a time, and they can continue to do that if the conditions aren't safe to host that town meeting. That was just one of several steps that were taken to kind of give our cities and towns more flexibility to deal with the fiscal realities of this. But so actually, Kevin, that's one of the nice things. I mean, I've actually been participating in a number of local selectmen's meetings in my towns. They've invited me. They're all doing them now. Some are using different platforms. Some of them are using Zoom. And I've been actually zoomed in with the board members on several occasions, which is kind of nice because I don't normally always get to go to selectmen's meetings that frequently, but it is good to be able to hear from our local elected officials in this kind of a setting. So yeah, we've been I've actually I would say probably in closer contact than normal. I hear from the local officials all the time. Just was talking to our town moderator in Pembroke today. So that from that point of view, it's actually been really good.
Again, if you're just joining us, we're speaking with State Representative Josh Cutler, representing the 6th Plymouth District. He is our guest, who we have regular conversations with him. We're fortunate to be able to talk with him. I want to kind of get back to something you had mentioned that you've been doing on a regular basis. You pride yourself on bringing information to folks, and you had mentioned you've been doing it via local cable television. You recently held a legal aid. Was it a legal aid forum? What was that like?
Yeah, we had just this past Wednesday, we had a legal aid forum. It was great. We had 4 attorneys from South Coast County's legal services, and they came on and talked about issues that are of importance, particularly these times: housing law, landlord-tenant issues, unemployment benefits questions, and elder law questions. And so we had experts on all of those topics. And we did a live show streaming through our community access station and also on Facebook Live. And we're able to take questions from viewers, on a live basis and also send in ahead of time. And it was great, Kevin. I was very pleasantly surprised. We got a pretty good viewership, it seemed like. We got a lot of questions sent in, and I think we covered a lot of material that was really helpful to people. In fact, one thing I would just like to reiterate, because it was something that I'd seen some different information about online, and for our viewers and listeners right now who may be struggling with covering their mortgage, trying to pay for their mortgage, and some folks have already applied for what's called forbearance with their mortgage company. And so folks may not be aware that in Massachusetts we have actually stronger protections in place than the federal government. And so if you are someone who is applied for forbearance, contrary to what maybe happens at the federal level, in Massachusetts, the law says that if you do apply, those payments that you are not paying do not become due when the forbearance ends. They get put at the end of the mortgage. So in other words, if you have a 20-year mortgage or a 30-year mortgage, it would be tacked on to the end. So it doesn't mean you're going to be expected to pay 3 months worth of rent or 3 months worth of mortgage payments right when this public emergency ends. no, you would be paying them at the end of your tacked on to the end of your mortgage. So that's a big distinction that's different than the federal law. And so the Massachusetts law offers a lot more protections. And so I think that's something people may not be aware of, because I've seen people asking me those kinds of questions and seeing some contrary information out there. So just that was a great piece of information, nugget to share that came up today with our housing attorney experts. So I thought it was really helpful, and we're going to be doing more of this kind of programming.
Yeah, seeing that you've realized resounding success with it, what would be the next forum that you would hold like that?
Well, we're working. So I've been, you may be familiar, Kevin, I've been doing a lot of work. I lead an initiative called the Workability Subcommittee, and we're focused on trying to improve opportunities for people with disabilities to find success in the workplace. It was something we've been doing the last, it's been since over a year. And, throughout this term, we've been working on a lot of issues involving workplace development for folks with disabilities. And so we are planning a program for surrounding that. I have a great expert who we're going to bring in to talk about those issues, and also issues around benefits and questions that family members who may have disabilities, questions about what the impact of, for instance, the stimulus checks might have on your benefits, and other questions like that. So we're going to be doing a show focused on folks with disabilities and trying to help them make sure that they have the information that they need. So that'll be something. But honestly, we welcome ideas. I did a show with the rest of my South Shore colleagues on small business issues. That was really good. We had a lot of interest in that. I know some of my colleagues, Rep. Linatra's done a great series on mental health issues. So, really, these are kind of the nice things that we weren't thinking about doing these things before necessarily, and now we are. And that's a nice thing, a nice service, I think, that we can offer to bring those voices out. So happy to hear your ideas, Kevin, or any of our listeners or viewers, if they have a topic they want to see us delve into.
Well, I think it's great to have an individual like yourself, like Rep. Linatra, the South Shore delegation. There's so many great individuals who are doing a great job.
Rep. Muratori had us on. We did a regional show with other folks from Plymouth to talk about issues, not just for Plymouth, but the Plymouth area. So that was good too.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I mean, you have CrossTalk. He's got State Matters. You both have your own individual programs to get the word out to the.
But he doesn't have a Kevin Tachi, so I'm up on him, I think.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah, just a little bit, just a little bit. Talk to me. I've had a chance with other reps that I've talked with. Talk to me about the importance of your staff, if you will.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Gigi and Cole, who work for me, and a great intern, Lizzie, as well. They obviously are impacted by this as well. They're both working from home, and it's actually a lot of work. There's been a really increase in the number of constituent cases that we've been handling, and that we love to hear from everybody, and we're glad that we're able to help. But it definitely an increase in the volume. Just unemployment cases. Cole, my aide Cole, handles a lot of the unemployment cases, and that's been a lot of casework, and a lot of people who need help. And we're glad that we're able to be a liaison to kind of try to cut through some of the red tape occasionally and get people the help that they need. But Cole and Gigi have been great, and Cole, it's a little tough because I contact him 7 days a week, and I'm referring cases to him 7 days a week. And I have to remember sometimes that he does need some time off. But yeah, they're working hard and doing a great job, and really appreciate that.
How have you been doing? How have you been handling this? Again, you're talking about your staff and realizing that you reach out to them 7 days a week. That means that you're working 7 days a week. What are you doing to be able to make sure that you're recharging so you can stay on top of these things?
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of used to that because that's kind of my schedule anyway. But it is. I would to say I'm looking forward to when we can get back out a little bit. I don't feel like I'm healthy right now. I'm not exercising the way I used to. I do this over the week. On the weekends, I try to do something a little bit outdoorsy. I took the kids to Tubbs Meadow last weekend, and we took a walk, and that's in Pembroke. We actually saw a turtle crossing in front of us, which was kind of cool. So trying to do stuff like that. Obviously, our options are a little bit limited. We can't go to Duxbury Beach right now, and certain places that aren't best to go to. But I do try to get out. Although I am looking forward to trying to get back into going to the gym more regularly and doing things like that, because it's sitting around too much is not good. So I'm hanging in there.
So I would ask you this: you have children yourself, Charlie and Lila. How
Yeah.
are they handling? How are they doing in regards to the school situation and the new normal? How are they handling, and how are you watching them as they handle it?
Yeah, well, I don't want to get them in trouble. I would say, my daughter is doing amazing. She gets a ton of homework, actually, probably more than she ever did, and she's doing a great job. She gets a lot, and she actually reaches out to her teacher and asks for new assignments and stuff. And my son is taking advantage of this. I would say he's playing a bit too much on the video games with his cousins and his friends. I would say I don't want to say anymore and get him in trouble, but they're doing good. I think it's tough. The school part of it is probably the toughest part of this because it's tough on the parents. If you have young children, obviously my kids are older. If you have young children, it's really tough. And it's, tough on the teachers because, they're thrown into this new, and the kids, they've basically lost, a good chunk of this academic year, and that, they're just not going to be able to easily get back. So that is something that, we're going to struggle with, I think, a little bit, moving forward, how we sort of try to close that gap. But my kids are doing fine.
So again, we are speaking with State Representative Josh Cutler. He is our guest for this segment. We got a few more minutes with him. Has there been any whispers on the state level as to not prematurely opening up restaurants and making sure that there's a stringent plan in place, whether it's if they open up restaurants or stores, or being able to go to the barber? Is there discussion about that and discussion of a possible second wave?
Second wave of cases?
Yeah, like a spike.
Yeah, so obviously, so the governor is formed, as folks may be familiar, the governor formed his reopening advisory commission panel chaired by Lieutenant Governor Polito, and they've been, their 17-member panel, and they've been meeting already. And there have been some suggestions made about maybe perhaps expanding that membership, but at this point, that's what it is. And they do have, and I would recommend folks check it out if they have feedback they want to share. They do have a portal on mass.gov. If you go to mass.gov and just type in reopening advisory panel, I think it'll come right up. And there's a portal where a brief questionnaire where you can share kind of details about your business or where you work and what your comments or suggestions would be. And I would encourage folks to do that. We've had a lot of people reach out to us, and a lot of, both all sides of the gamut. We have small business folks who are kind of itchy to get back to work. I hear from people who, are concerned about, workers who are concerned about going back to work and whether it's, safe for them and their families to do so. So, I'll hear all sides of that. So it's going to be a challenge. And there's certain businesses that I think, are going to be able to open up quicker and faster than others. Obviously, the first thing I'm thinking about doing is getting my hair cut. I got to go to, Joe the Barber in Hanson where I go, although I don't know how that's going to work because obviously getting a haircut is something that, it does require, technically close contact and stuff. So I'm not sure how that's going to work, but I'm fully supportive of trying to get that worked out because I know I need a haircut, and I'm sure, Kevin, you look like you could probably use one, and I'm sure our listeners and viewers, are probably in the same boat. So definitely going to try to prioritize that.
We got about 2 or 3 minutes left here in our segment, and I thank you again for taking time out of your schedule to chat with me and bring folks up to speed. Anything you want to touch upon that we haven't discussed, but you want to make sure at least you either mention or reiterate to the people who are viewing or listening?
Yeah, no, I think we've touched on a lot of good material, obviously, and things are changing rapidly still. I guess I would just say if anybody, needs help, please don't be shy about asking for it. We have a lot of resources that we can try to connect you with, whether you're, talking about unemployment, the new pandemic unemployment, if you're a gig employer, a gig worker, self-employed, whether you're a small business and trying to get help with the PPP loans or the economic disaster loans from the SBA. Feel free, please do reach out to us, to our office, here to help. You can email us, josh.cutler@mahouse.gov, and me or my staff will be happy to work with you. So do want to make sure people, are really encouraged to reach out, especially, I always say that, but especially now.
So the last thing I would ask you is where would you, where would your first meal be? Would I be getting you in trouble?
Yeah, I'm not going to pick just one because we have a lot of good restaurants in my district. And I have to think about that. But I have to come back to the haircut. My first priority is getting a haircut, because you can't see this on video, and definitely can't see it on radio. But I kind of botched it when I tried to do it myself, and maybe it looks okay on here, but in reality, it doesn't look so good, and I definitely need a haircut.
You got like a Max Headroom look to you.
Yeah, okay. Easy there, Kevin. At least I got hair, right?
Right, I know, right? Absolutely. Well, listen, please, you and yours be safe and in good health. And we thank you for all that you do, whether it's the virtual forums that you're holding for your constituents or your work up on Beacon Hill, whether it's in front of your computer or not. We thank you for your help and your assistance.
My pleasure. Good to see you.
You got it. All right. Thank you very much for tuning in for yet another segment like this. I promise there's more on deck. Don't go anywhere.